Welcome, everyone. My name is Elisia Cohen, and I want to welcome you to what is our third event in this series, exploring how the media industry has responded to various public health, economic, and social challenges of 2020. Today, we're going to have a conversation about where newsrooms are headed in the next 5 years. Our panelists will share how the pandemic has changed how they work. We'll talk about what new digital initiatives are on the horizon, and we'll talk about how the news media cover race and how the events of 2020 have affected their coverage. First, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I'll begin to ask them a few questions. First, I want to introduce Lisa Hills. She's on Executive Director of the Minnesota Newspaper Association. That is the trade association for Minnesota's 300 weekly and daily newspapers and its training arm of the Minnesota News Media Institute. Lisa Hills has been with the association since 1989, serving as its advertising director until 2006 when she was named executive director. She also serves on the Minnesota Advertising Federation Board of Directors, the Minnesota Journalism Center's advisory board for the school, and she is a past president of the Newspaper Association Manager Board of Directors. Next, I'd like to introduce Matt McMillan, who's CEO of Press Publications, Northstar Media, Kanabec Publications, Sentinel Publications, and Printers Publishers Incorporated. He's a group that's a group of non-daily newspapers and 2 printing plants. And he's been in the industry for more than 25 years, served on the Minnesota Newspaper Association Board of Directors, North Dakota Newspaper Association Board of Directors, and currently serves on America's Newspapers Board of Directors. And last, I have Renee Sanchez, our editor and senior vice president of Star Tribune in town. Rene leads Minnesota's largest news organizations, overseeing all aspects of its print and digital editions. He helped lead the Star Tribune's investigation of child deaths at daycare facilities in Minnesota that earned the 2013 Pulitzer Prize for local reporting. Sanchez's journalism career began in New Orleans at the Times-Picayune. He then spent 17 years as a local and national reporter for the Washington Post before joining us here in Minnesota. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Lisa and Matt, for joining me here today. We're so glad to have you here. I want to first focus this conversation on 2020 and how news organizations really entered the year. If you could talk a little bit about some of the challenges, where you started, and then both in handling the COVID-19 pandemic, how you pivoted, a word that we've heard a lot, and some of the social unrest in Minneapolis. But if you could, I'd like to give each of you a chance to go back to think about January of 2020. Can you tell me some of your organization's strategic goals to begin the year? And Renee, I'll begin with you since I see your camera is up front and center.
Sure, thank you. January feels about 5 years ago and about 10,000 Zoom meetings ago. And so, the headline for us would be that the end of the year looks almost nothing like the beginning of the year. It's startling to think of it in those terms because we started the year with a lot of initiatives planned, both digital and some in print. And a lot of that just had to be put aside because of just the enormity and the relentlessness of first the pandemic and obviously the racial reckoning and tragedy and all the questions that have sprung from the George Floyd killing at the end of May. That coupled with the fact that we cleared our newsroom March 15th and we have not been back. And so it has just been an off the charts, exceptionally challenging, profoundly difficult year. It sort of boggles the mind that we just did an election night with 230 plus journalists all working remotely from their basements and kitchens and living rooms and such, and one of the most elaborate choreographies we've ever had to design to make it work well in real time. And so it has been, I can't even begin to guess how many stories we've published on the pandemic, how many digital graphics and interactive steps we've published on the pandemic. We're on the fly, kind of completely rethinking the depth and sweep of our coverage about race and equity in both the Twin Cities and Minnesota. So I can go on all day, which I won't, but December compared to January is just astonishing. And we yet can't see where it will take us. We've learned a lot of things about our digital audience that are good, positive things, and the value of in-depth journalism that has shined through in this difficult year more than ever. So there's perhaps an incredibly heartening fact there, and I can talk about that more later. But it is utterly remarkable as a journalistic year and how we've had to shift gears for so long.
Thank you. Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about your organization's beginning of the year goals and where you were back in January?
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to echo a lot of Renee's comments. It has been a remarkable year, and we are at this moment nowhere near where we started out. At the end of January, MNA hosted a convention for over 600 newspaper people in an event center in a hotel in the Twin Cities. And of course, at this moment, when you say that, you kind of go, you couldn't imagine being with 600 people in one room. MNA's core mission has stayed the same. Our mission is to enhance the welfare of the newspaper industry, but in many ways, MNA is a reflection of what's happening to its members. And we were working on making sure that we could promote the industry. We were going to offer in-person training sessions. 2020 was our year to have strategic planning for the Newspaper Association. And suddenly everything came to a halt in the middle of March. Probably around the 15th or 16th, MNA started to work remotely, and we've completely switched gears. Immediately, we started to work behind the scenes to make sure that newspapers were declared essential services before Governor Walz issued the stay-at-home order. We've done a lot of lobbying on the federal level to make sure that local journalism issues or local journalism is supported. And it's just been a completely different year than what we've thought. Our meetings have all gone to a virtual format. Staff members are still working remotely. And it's just been a huge change from where we thought we were going to begin the year and end the year.
Thank you. And Matt, can you talk a little bit about your organization, where it started at the beginning of the year, and a few shifts that came shortly thereafter?
Yeah, thank you. We do an all-employee survey each year, and we ask our employees what their priorities for our company would be. And our identified top priority for the year is growing our relevance, becoming more vital to our readers and our business marketing partners. We also had a goal to fill some vacant positions, train our staff, and produce even more meaningful content for our products and our marketing customers. And we've been able to do that this year in different ways than we anticipated than at the beginning of the year. And I'm super proud of the team. Our company is a group of 20 community weekly newspapers in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And we have 2 printing facilities, one in Minnesota and one in Wisconsin. They're vital to our company operating. And so we've had printing plant production workers running through all of this. Our offices never closed. We thinned out our offices where we could have distancing in them. We put in place work at home agreements for those who could do that. We're having obviously Zoom meetings and that type of thing, covering the community. We still need to be out and about in the community to do that. We can't do that from our basement. And so we've been able to get out. It'll be interesting this winter, because we've been in like Lisa said, it was March really when it started. Spring was springing, and we've had all summer, but it'll be interesting to see how we've been able to do it. The news team has done a remarkable job. We started weekly all news calls with all of our news team, and we went through story ideas for everybody all at once rather than trying to have a round robin conversation about what's important to readers right now. We just did it all together. And we did that with our marketing teams too. We had an all sales call every week. We went through examples of papers from the museum. The museum has front pages from all the papers, and many of the papers in the United States posted every day. And we would go through 100 different newspaper examples during an all news meeting, talk about the stories that others are covering, and then relate that. We need to tell this national and state story through local voices. We're community newspapers. We don't have statewide and national reporters. So we need to tell this through local voices. And so we tried to figure out a way to localize that.
Touch on how audience engagement has shifted. I've been asking this of people throughout this series, and it's been really different for people who are in the radio business with commute times being changed, or the television business. So what are some of the ways that audience engagement has shifted for you in your work? Renee, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, well, we have seen our readership demonstrate just a voracious appetite over our pandemic coverage in all forms of it, not just the daily public health data. Our traffic engagement around the in-depth pieces we've published has really engaged the audience, as well as a real appetite for what we call utility. To sort of dive in and see. We just published something or launched something a few weeks ago in which people could, in an interactive way, look at COVID cases in their community and how that has evolved. So that has been great depth of engagement. Similarly, stories around policing and the array of difficult, tough questions about next steps in the city of Minneapolis. A lot of audience gravitating to that, a lot of comment engagement on Minneapolis and policing and the broader racial reckoning. And so that has just been a dominant form of engagement all year long. I will say, though, we've noticed one other phenomenon, which is that, you know, what year has been more serious, more difficult, more taxing on everyone than this one? You know, there is no year in a sense. And one of the things we've seen is at the same time our audience is gravitating intensely to these hugely important stories, they are also flocking for relief. And so our feature staff, some of the lighter how we live content, how sort of like, you know, communities have tried to come up with some semblance of joy and coping. We've actually seen a lot of audience engagement around that too. And so that we've actually tried to kind of prime that pump a little bit. We did a virtual state fair in August that the audience really received well as a kind of escape or relief, even as they were kind of diving in. So we've seen these two ends of the spectrum in a way that's been striking.
Lisa, how have you all pivoted from planning face-to-face trainings, obviously, to other activities engaging? And what are you hearing from your membership?
The membership, I'm hearing that their readership, both in print and online, has increased. Much as Renee has described, people want more information and are looking to local news sources or news sources to provide that information. You know, accurate news has become more critical than it's ever been and valuable. For M&A, we've taken all of our training sessions to virtual, and in a normal year, M&A offers editor and publisher community leadership program that is sponsored by a grant from the Blandon Foundation. And the grant this year we used to offer a virtual training on solutions. And it was a leadership session that focused on sustaining a healthy newspaper in support of a healthy community. And we had participation from 65 or 70 newspaper members throughout the state. We offered 14 different sessions, and the sessions were 2 hours each. And the discussions were very good. And we had the newspapers break into separate balcony groups to discuss their issues. And then we recorded their takeaways. And as a result of the takeaways, we presented a book to all members with some of the ideas and solutions that were discussed. And it was on a variety of topics. And so we're just trying to find ways. People are suffering from Zoom fatigue. We're well aware of that, but finding ways that people can network and connect, because that's an important role of the association.
Matt, what about your group of papers? Obviously keeping the print up, your printing press operations open was a priority. But what about how you've been engaging with audiences differently? What has worked and what has been tough in the...
Yeah, we've, in some ways, this has brought out a real appreciation of local business, of local news, of local content. And so our readers have really rallied around us during this time. We've seen about a 30% jump in our online traffic. We've had boxes of donuts and cupcakes delivered to our office from readers saying, thank you, keep up the good work. We had planned to do our best of contest and delayed it from April till the fall. When we ran that contest, some of the businesses who were nominated, our readers nominate businesses to be on the list to vote. And one lady who was nominated owns a restaurant. She cried when she found out that her business had been nominated. She needed business badly. And so we've had a lot of interaction. We had a record amount of voting going on during the Best of contest. Our subscription campaigns, which we do in the spring and the fall, have far exceeded anything the company has ever seen. And donations, we've put a journalism donation option up on our website. We grew between a 25% and 400% on our subscription drives this year. And it's just amazing how as people I think are at home more, have valued this local content and this local journalism and telling the story through local people's voices. So it's definitely brought us closer to our readers, and it's brought us closer to our marketing partners. They've had to decide with more limited budgets where to put their money. And we've just had tremendous response for some of those people running campaigns with us. It's been a remarkable year. We have 15 new testimonials that came in this week from marketing partners with us, 15 in 1 week. And it's just amazing. So it's all about audience and engagement. And it supersized that engagement this year.
All of you have pointed to some bright spots with engaging audiences, but I'm sure there have been some tough challenges as well. And we know that there have been some closures in Minnesota as well. So what have been your tough challenges? And can you talk a little bit about how you think some of the changes that you've made for perhaps for the better will have a permanent impact on the way you do your work in business? Renee, I'll start with you on that question.
Well, I think, gosh, it's uncommon to say this, but I think this year has presented us with a stark and rolling challenge, foremost, frankly, with the safety of our staff. And in a real-time way, working with the staff, we have tried to ensure their safety. I mean, the reporting around the pandemic really confronted us with questions of sort of the balancing act between wanting to do a good job for readers and showing them this story unfold in a human way, but also establishing a firm line as the what risk we would not take, what were our protocols that we've never had protocols for a pandemic, of course. And so that has presented us with a year-long challenge in terms of staff safety that we've had to scramble to try to meet consistently as it changed, as did the rioting in this summer, which we wanted to cover deeply and well. I believe we did, but that presented us with enormous challenges about safety for reporters and photographers in the field. Several of them were harmed by rubber bullets. We had to talk to the state and local officials about conduct there. So, I mean, it has been a traumatizing year for our staff. And frankly, I mean, the courage that so many of them have shown has been incredibly impressive in the service they've given readers at a time when, another challenge has been the economics. And like all media across the country, the sudden sort of sledgehammer effect of a shutdown society in the spring drilled a giant hole in the company's finances that required sacrifice of everyone. And so I think our challenge has been to cover these enormous stories well, relentlessly, but to keep up staff morale at a time when people were also sacrificing some of their income and also taking personal safety risks. And it's just been extraordinary to see the commitment to journalism from the staff, despite the enormity of those challenges.
I just want to follow up with one quick question. Morale has been a huge issue for every organization around those issues. Are there any particular tricks or things that you think that you've done as an organization that's helped that would be takeaways for others?
I can't say I can't boast that we've gotten exactly right, because the challenge has been so huge and shifting and such. I mean, I can say what we've tried to do is be very responsive as fast as we can to safety concerns. Suddenly we're scrambling to requisition things like gas masks and I also think we've just really tried to communicate more than ever. It's very difficult inside these video screens. And so we've encouraged all our department leaders to try to engage with their staffs. There's been an assortment of things like virtual happy hours but I can't, I don't want to shave the truth. That has been a significant challenge given just the profound disruptions of the year, and just because we moved from pandemic to the racial reckoning to an incredibly difficult and challenging election season. Having one of those in a year is challenge enough. Having three plus all the rest of the news is just mind-boggling. And so, I'm incredibly proud of the grit and commitment the staff has shown, and we've tried to do our best to keep the morale up. And I think people have found a way, by and large, to really just do an incredible job.
Thanks so much. I think that it's, there are no slow days right now in 2020 is what we like to say around higher ed right now, even in our school. And I'm sure it's even more challenging for news organizations just out there in the field, just getting stories. Lisa, what are you hearing from your organization, and what solutions and ideas came up around the greatest challenges of the year?
They were immense. The challenges, a lot of them were revenue-based. The newspapers continue to operate and provide news, but their revenue sources businesses and events and schools have been shut down or drastically reduced, and providing, they don't have the revenue to continue operating. So it's a big challenge. For M&A, we've worked hard at trying to find and provide resources that members can utilize. We provide lists of funding options that we're aware of that they can take advantage of, and just providing as much support as possible. As you mentioned, several newspapers have closed, and we've had a couple of mergers, and many of the dailies in the state of Minnesota have reduced publication days, print publication days, and have changed to a digital publication day or an e-edition, which I'm hearing is being well received and successful. It was a bit of a change for their readers, but it's being received success, or with a degree of success. But when a community loses a newspaper, it's a tremendous void. It's a historical record of a community, and it's oftentimes the only source of information of the events that are happening in the community. The local government meetings, obituaries, we hear there's not a spot that people can go to see when any of the services are. It covers all the local meetings. They cover all the events. They have advertising. They cover new businesses that are open and closing. And so the void is tremendous when a newspaper closes. And there are many studies out there that will tell you that civic engagement is lowered as a result of a newspaper, community losing a newspaper. So it's a huge concern. And at this moment, no one has found a solution yet for that.
Matt, can you talk a little bit about your greatest challenges and what you have been working on as an organization, and what permanent impacts from 2020 might there be to your business?
So after we put together safety plans and figured out a way that we could operate and keep people healthy, the number one challenge by far was revenue. And in our communities, we were between, the best market we have was 12% off. The worst market was 70% off. We don't have margins like that. So PPP was a lifesaver for our business, but also most of the businesses up and down Main Street. That program was vital, and we've since, our businesses hit the bottom in June, and it's grown back each month since then. We've grown a little bit more each month since then. The businesses that we normally do business with, many of them shut down, some of them by orders of the government, some of them because they had COVID outbreaks in their businesses. And so when they're shut down, they don't do business with us. And so that was a direct impact. Some of them won't come back, and that will be a permanent impact. And it's going to be hard on the community, on all the communities. It's going to have a ripple effect into people who own commercial real estate, have a ripple effect into banks, colleges. I think there's going to be a number of effects that we're going to see coming as a result of that. The supply chain was disrupted, for many businesses, and that slowed down. Where preprint and insert advertising was affected the most out of everything, and grocery stores came back the quickest, and the rest have not. But when all of that hit, I'm proud to say that we didn't. We were able to repurpose our staff into open positions. We had to scale back on the number of total full-time people, but because we had other open positions, we had a reporter who took a sales job. in one of our markets, just to stay with the company. And hopefully that person will go back to a reporting position after this is over. But the people remain flexible. And I think we only had, in the end, we had 2 people quit for health reasons, but I think we only had 1 part-time person. We were able to repurpose everyone else. And I'm very proud that people were flexible and we were able to do that.
I want to change our topic of conversation just a bit to talk a little bit about civil unrest, issues of diversity, equality, inclusivity in the news business. Because of course, the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis really has launched both a local conversation and a national one on police brutality and the relationship between citizens and their police departments, particularly given rising, crime in many cities across the country, including Minneapolis. Within our local media industry, also the issue of how news media cover race, police actions, and broader challenges regarding diversity and equity in journalism have come up, particularly as we've seen a growth in the diversity of our population across the state. And so my question is, how has your organization thought about these issues? That is, how to improve coverage and best represent the community in your work, not just this year, but really across time and moving forward strategically as well. Renee, do you want to start with this?
Sure. Along with all the news that has come our way, we really stopped mid-year and began to reflect in a deep new way on this question and the urgency around it. And, we've tried to look at it in a 2-track way, both internally within the culture of our newsroom and where we have succeeded on diversity and equity and where we have some miles to go. And then externally, how does our coverage project to this community as it changes? What are our strengths and weaknesses? And I think what we found that we had to do first and foremost is listen. And listen perhaps harder than we ever have, and have the humility to accept that we were missing some aspects of the feeling and the perspective that journalists of color in our newsroom and leaders in the civic community had on these questions. And so, what's interesting is that sometimes when you're in a position of leadership, whether it's me, whether it's other department leaders, you sort of try to rush toward problems and see how quickly you can solve them. I think in this instance, we had to do something counterintuitive and actually shut up for a long time and let our journalists of color in our newsroom, they did something really powerful and organic. And they spent about a month talking among themselves to try to sort of align their perspective and priority in a fresh way. And they brought it to us. And we had a couple of real consequential and raw and sincere meetings outside, socially distanced beside the river, talking for hours about this and how we had to dare ourselves to get much better, to look at our newsroom and intensify our commitment across the spectrum of crafts and departments to make gains, particularly in terms of racial equity, and to think anew about our coverage. And so from that has come a series of what I would call impactful immediate steps to lay down a marker of a new sense of priority and commitment. And we're actually meeting with our staff right now in a series of rolling meetings to kind of come up with a broader strategy for 2021. But there's no turning back. And I really believe that, hard as the challenge may be on some fronts, our goal is to look up a year from now and be able to credibly point to a lot of substantial gains, both in terms of coverage and also within the culture of the newsroom.
Matt, is your organization considering similar issues and challenges? Or, this doesn't seem to be an issue that's really just impacting cities or, you know, a large commercial newspaper, I think that communities have really shifted in terms of what they look like across the state. And this is a challenge broadly, but I'm curious to see how these issues, maybe not about the Minneapolis Police Department per se, but about race relations and the relationship between government and the press, have picked up in your outlets as well.
Yeah. So America's Newspapers had a great webinar on this for community newspapers like ours to think about. And in Dallas at the Dallas Morning News, in Seattle at the Seattle Times, they have diversity reporters, full-time dedicated people to diversity. And they spoke, and I attended that session, and they talked about sourcing. Does the sourcing that you use reflect the community? And things like that can be done in smaller news organizations. We had these weekly all news meetings, and we were looking at coverage from many different markets across the United States from those front pages, and took away some really impactful ideas. But we tried to tell this again through our own residents. And so when a city council was dealing with policing, we had a business in one of our markets give $10,000, a florist, $10,000 worth of flowers to the George Floyd Memorial. There were community conversations going on race. There was a task force that was put together to study racial equality in one of the communities. So trying to tell this story through local voices, and thinking about new ways to do that, and including more people in the stories themselves.
And Lisa, how has M&A picked up this thread? Has this have these concerns been part of your trainings or conversations recently?
They have, and I mentioned earlier that M&A provides an editor and publisher community leadership program, and we use the 9 dimensions of a healthy community as a basis for the program. And this is Blandon's 9 dimensions of a healthy community, but one of the dimensions is inclusion. And it's a topic that we have a lot of discussion on during the meetings, to make sure that the newspapers are reflecting all voices in the community. And there's a lot of discussion about how to do that. I've seen newspapers across the state start to translate some of their pages into different languages. The Long Prairie Leader newspaper just started a Spanish language newspaper to serve the Latino community in Long Prairie. And I know that newspaper publishers and editors have been very thoughtful about what they need to do to start conversations to make sure everyone's included and included in their coverage. And they're in a unique role that they have the power to frame an issue and really mobilize action to get results. And a lot of them are working hard to make sure that all voices are covered. In our virtual training this summer, it was a topic that had a lot of discussion and just sharing ideas of inclusion. And newspapers are working hard at that.
So one of the questions that I'd like to raise with our panelists is, what advice do you have for young people, particularly students from communities who are underrepresented in our newspaper business? Are there pipeline programs, internships that you all offer? What can they do to see themselves as part of your organizations in the future? Do you have any advice for them? I'll start with you, Renee.
You know, we're going to be over the next year or two rethinking some of our programs for young journalists. We do have the classic summer internship program, but you know, we're going to spend the next 6 months trying to get more acquainted with an array of young journalists. And I would say the two imperatives when we look at the kinds of journalists that we most need, it would be journalists who are nimble, who actually bring, there's never a substitute, no matter how digital we get, to skilled reporting. That is what our readership expects of us, demands of us. And so, there's no shallow way out of the challenges. And so we firmly believe that it all starts with a commitment to depth of reporting and relentlessness. So that is the number one skill and ethic we're always looking for, same as it ever was. But we do look for people with skills and the ability to think interactively with their audience and have perhaps video skills, photo skills with their phone, and to think in digitally innovative ways when they cover things. That they don't necessarily just see it through the pure classic lens of that is a story, I will write 15 paragraphs. What are other innovative ways? We're seeing our audience gravitate to substantive, innovative forms of journalism. And so that's a question we're asking ourselves more than others. And sometimes the generation rising up has those answers.
Lisa, what advice would you give young people who are thinking about a future career in journalism and newspapers?
It's still a great career. I'm going to share a quick quote. M&A has an internship program, and we provide funding to 10 newspapers to hire an intern. And one of the interns took the job not really having very high expectations. And one of the things he said was, I was thrown into the mix learning what it was actually like to be a journalist, and it was exhilarating. And then he went on to say, the whole internship experience has been an amazing one, both personally and professionally. I never saw myself as a journalist until it began, but I cannot see myself anywhere else now that I've gotten a taste of what this is like. And so I think there's a lot of good news and a lot of fun positions, great positions still available at the newspapers. M&A has a job board, and it's on our website. And I believe we share it with the U. I know that we share it with several of the journalism schools throughout the state. But there's a lot of opportunity to network, and don't be afraid to reach out. And I think that's the best advice that we can give. Don't be afraid to reach out. There's some great opportunities at newspapers across the state.
Matt, do you have other ideas to add and about your own internship processes and hiring processes for your publications?
Yeah, I would just suggest wherever you live, when you're not at school, approach your community newspaper. And even if they don't have a formal program, many of them are open to creating one. And we do that when people approach us. Sometimes these internships last more than 1 year. They can last 1, 2, 3, 4 years while people are in school. And feedback from the last couple we've had has been like Lisa talked about, that they've learned more in a concentrated period of time than they had before. And it's practical on the job stuff. You get bylines you can show to future employers. You can find out what you like about different aspects of reporting and focus on that. I'd encourage you to get to know a reporter, somebody who's actually doing the job, and start reading their work. Set up a Google News alert for that particular reporter and read their writing. Get to know somebody who's doing a great job that you like, and just follow them. And the other thing that I would say is, I would find out when you get to the point of wanting an internship or career with a news organization, find out who owns it. and the Star Tribune is family owned. The Seattle Times is family owned. Colorado Springs Gazette, family owned. Little Rock, Arkansas, family owned. Philadelphia Inquirer, family owned. There's most of the community newspapers in Minnesota that Lisa represents are community owned. Family owned. And so if you have a choice, just use that as part of your screening process. There's a little bit more of an opportunity, I think, in those organizations. They have a little more flexibility, maybe to create an internship program on the fly, or work with you if you have specific interests in the type of reporting that you want to do.
Thank you so much. I want to invite our audience members to ask questions in our Q&A. We have about a little more than 10 minutes left, and I'm happy to, if people go down to on their Zoom window to Q&A and click on the box, they can submit questions for our panelists, and I'll select some. One person, Betty Beer, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, asked if the panelists had any comments on the closing of Southwest Journal and many others.
Well, I can jump in and say, that's always a sad moment. I think, the answer to any such question is more journalism is better. I live in Minneapolis. That publication landed on my doorstep, and I thought they did a good job. We feel like it raises a question for us, which is that if that publication is no longer going to be there, what can we do possibly to help fill some of that void? But it's tough to see.
I would echo what Renee said on that. It's, as I said before, it's always sad for a community and for everyone when the community loses a newspaper. The local coverage, there's no one else doing it. And in areas that have lost a newspaper, there's information shared, but it's not accurate always. And it is a huge void. It's sad.
We've had neighboring publishers close, and I'm meeting with one tomorrow as a coincidence, and we're going to talk about those things, if there's something we could do to help in the communities that are affected.
And then many of you have touched on, but particularly Renee, you touched on the growth of digital. And you were gracious enough to share a presentation with me and other members of the Twin Cities Communications Council a little bit a while ago this summer in terms of how the Star Tribune was doing. Can you speak a little bit about the future directions of digital that you see, and maybe others of you have been thinking more about this with the closure of with less print and more engagement, at least right now? I'm sure that's something that you all are looking to sustain over time.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that we do not think to this day, to this moment, that it's an either or question. We are still bullish on print, and we have a large and loyal print audience that we don't want to forsake. And so it presents us with quite a juggling act. But I do need to assert that we don't believe, from our vantage point, 7-day print is going anywhere in the short term. And but that said, our single biggest priority is to build our digital subscription class, and to get that number of paying digital customers, preferably digital customers who also are interested in the Sunday print edition. And we're doing well by that. There are a lot of headwinds against it. But this year, remarkably, has been our best year. And I think it has been our best year because of the enormity of the stories swirling around people's lives. For me, the most heartening fact of the year was that in the spring, we dropped our paywall on questions about the pandemic as a public service. We felt like that was something essential we had to do for readers. And so you could come to that coverage and immerse yourself in it with no restrictions. And, there was a twinge of worry about that because we thought, gosh, that could create more economic challenge. We saw within 100 days, the effect had been the opposite. In that period, our rate of digital subscriptions actually tripled. So it was sort of counterintuitive. and heartening, because it really speaks to when you just let rip with just strong, in-depth journalism every single day about something of widespread importance and concern to readers. It helps the bottom line. And so I think we are feeling, I don't want to be casual about the challenges, but I think we are feeling more heartened than ever that the answer to these challenges is not a gimmick and it's not a magic trick. It is real deal journalism. And I think that is fueling a pretty consistent rise in digital subscriptions. But that's where we want to be. We really want to get that number up higher and higher, because we think ultimately we are going to be buttressed by the relationship with consumers more than sometimes the headwinds that are created in the advertising marketplace.
I want to let Matt respond to this as well, but I want to incorporate a question that we've received from Sid Bedingfield, who's a faculty member in our audience today. And it's the business model for journalistic outlets. He says there's an argument that outlets can persuade their readers to provide the bulk of their revenue, have a chance to survive, but those that continue to rely on digital advertising will not. That subscription models, not advertising, are the best hope for the future. And under that argument, the New York Times and maybe the Wall Street Journal are well positioned, whereas digital native sites relying on advertising might be in danger. Matt, how do you think that community newspapers fit into this? Is it a subscription model? Is it a digital advertising model?
It's different for metros versus community newspapers. We've always had a different business model. The metros have a $500 a year subscription. We have a $50 a year subscription. So even if we convert every single person in every community we serve, that doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't pay for the newsroom. Papers like Little Rock, Arkansas, Walter Hussman, if you want to Google somebody to talk about the business model, he's done the math. He has 104 reporters, and he knows what he needs to pay for his newsroom. And so many of the newspapers are charging $10 a month, and it's not enough. They need $30 a month. Walter says $39 a month. So that business model, we're not going to get $39 a month for a weekly newspaper. But we also don't have 104 reporters either. So in the community newspaper, we need a 2 or 3-legged stool for a business model. We need advertising, which we retain, and many of us in the community newspaper world are the largest place that the community goes to advertise. And so that continues to work, and the success of those programs continues to help us with that. The subscription needs to be a growing part of it, but there's a lot of talk in the industry about a third leg to the stool. And America's Newspapers has had a couple of sessions on this as well. And one of those third legs that has been started in a number of places has been philanthropy and nonprofit donations to newsrooms to fund reporting positions. The Seattle Times has 3 news labs right now funded by nonprofits around homelessness and several other topics. And so I could see with some of the people and the foundations in our rural communities, we could potentially fund a position in each market with that. And that would help offset our cost. And so we're still looking, and we haven't settled on what's going to exactly be the third leg to the stool. There might be 5 legs to the stool when we're through this, but it won't be one. A subscription model for community newspaper by itself won't pay the bills.
Could I add one thing to that? Simply this, I mean, I think, there's not, to Matt's point, there's not a one size fits all strategy, but from our perspective, the consumer model, the subscription model, digital and print, that is absolutely vital. And what's distinct, though, and what is the core challenge for us is that the New York Times or the Washington Post, in pursuing that model, obviously they can beckon a global audience of people who care about the news, and that has served them extremely well over the last 5 years or so. We cannot do that. We have a finite audience of news consumers in the greater Twin Cities and Minnesota. And so journalistically, we have to sort of leverage our full power to compel them, but it really matters. I mean, it is, for this audience today listening to this, I can't stress enough how vital it is that consumer model kind of carry the day over time, because without it, we've made it through this year without any layoffs at all. And that is so due to the strength of our consumer model.
Lisa, do you have anything to add from your membership's perspective and from your observations?
Yes, and like Matt said, part of the concern for M&A is so many of our members serve small communities, and about a third of our members serve communities or have circulation of 5,000 and less. And there's a great number of them that have circulation under 1,500. And so the print newspaper or distributing in print continues to be one of the few ways that they're going to be able to have enough revenue to continue to supply news. And we're looking at different models as well. We're networking with our counterparts throughout the country, America's newspapers and the national newspaper associations, just to try to help and support and find out, offer solutions that are so needed now by our members.
Thank you all so much for spending time with me today. We have just one or so minute left, so I just wanted to offer each of you a few final words, in terms of words of inspiration for our students or about the rest of the year. What are you looking forward to the most? We'll end on a positive thought. Renee, start with you.
Well, I said this has been the toughest year ever. There's no sugarcoating it. And there's no quite end in sight. There's nothing magical that's going to happen on January 1st. That said, I don't think there's been a moment where we could stop and say how vital journalism is in our community, in this society. Of all the reckonings that have unfolded this year and are still unfolding, I think protecting journalism and making sure that our work is acting in the public interest, it's never been so starkly clear. And I think we are ending the year weary. We're ending the year, in this just sort of this surreal state of mind about remote work and such. But I think we're also ending the year believing more than ever in the power of public interest journalism.
Matt?
December 15th is National Press Freedom Day, I believe. And it's good timing. I feel like the industry has rallied this year. We have more people talking about us. Journalism Sustainability Act is in Congress, has 78 signers on it. There's another bill through the News Media Alliance that is taking on Google and Facebook. They've to balance their profiting on our news. There's a lot of good things that have developed this year. One of the efforts that's starting right now is there's a lot of baby boomers who own community newspapers in the United States who want to retire in the next coming years. There's going to be an entrepreneurial journalist who's going to buy some of these papers, and it can be a young college graduate who can be sold a paper on a contract for deed at a much lower rate than they used to go for. So there's a big entrepreneurial component potentially to being a news reporter, to being a journalist. And so there's going to be an opportunity in that area. And I just encourage you to follow a journalist, get to know a journalist, subscribe to a paper, follow M&A, follow SPJ, link on LinkedIn, find people you admire, connect with them. America's newspapers, M&A, whatever you can. And business world is about relationships, and you can start to build those while you're in school.
And Lisa, last thoughts from you. You're on mute. We were doing so well. There we go.
We love to hear from people who want careers in journalism. So there's a lot of hope. The founding fathers understood the value of an independent press and journalism. And there's never been a time when it's more important than it is right now. And so I encourage anyone to reach out. We have a lot of resources and we're happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your time today. I know, and for your graciousness and willingness to share with our school community. We really rely on alumni and friends and people involved in the industry to support our students, and anything that we can do to be of support to you as well. We're always interested and open to hearing your ideas. Thank you all for joining us, and we're going to sign off, which will boot everyone out of the Zoom room. So I'll have to say goodbye now. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.